So in this video we're going to be creating a HUD widget and maybe also a prompt widget as well, just to prompt the player to do things. Let's go ahead and jump right in. In part 2 we created the flashlight system. We also added the battery model, as you can see here. If you want to check out those videos, there'll be a link up here to the playlist. Go ahead and check them out. With the widget we can display things like the player's battery and also how many refills he has. And we can always add things to it later on as we build it into the game, so things like maybe player objectives and things like that. And the first thing we need to do is create the blueprint. So go here to add new, then down to user interface, and then I'm going to select widget blueprint. So now we need to rename this. I'm going to call it HUD underscore widget underscore BP, and then just go ahead and open it up. So you can see straight away that this blueprint is different from the actor blueprint that we've previously used. So by default we should be in the designer tab, so this is what the player will see. And when we add elements to this, we can start building up any kind of widget that we want. For this example we're going to create a HUD widget, which is just a heads up display. If you have things like a health bar, you'd add this too. And it's pretty much the same way that the battery system is going to be displayed. So even though I don't plan to use a health bar, it's pretty much the same setup. So for those of you who have not seen this layout before, this is the designer tab. We do have a graph tab like we did with the actor blueprint, but obviously we need to build up the assets here that we want to display onto the screen. And this is the viewport that we work in. We can search the palette and find things that we want to add to the screen. We have the hierarchy window. We have the animations section here, which we will be taking advantage of a little bit later on. And we have some properties details that we can look at as well. So straight away we can see we have the HUD widget blueprint, and it automatically has what's called a canvas panel. So anything that we want to display on the screen, we're going to drag and just add it to the canvas panel. So let's first add a crosshair to the center of the screen. You can add a picture of any kind of asset that you want. What we need to do is just go to the search box here and type image. And then we can grab this and we can either drag it onto the canvas directly, and then it will be added up here. Or if we undo that, we can just drag it straight to the scene and just place it wherever we want. As soon as we do that, we can see we have this strange icon here, and this is going to tell us where the anchor point is for this image that we have selected. If we deselect it, we can't see it anymore. And the anchor point is to obviously tell the asset where to sit on the screen. Since some screens will have different resolutions and different sizes, if we didn't set the anchor point, it would all look messed up and yeah, it wouldn't work properly. So make sure we set up the anchor points, and to do that, we just go over here to anchors. I'm going to select this one and drop this into the center. Now we can't see the image, so I'm going to have to zoom in. So if you wanted to, you could add an image of any kind of asset, some sort of stylized crosshair type thing if you want. All you need to do is go to the brush and then just load in the image, but you'd need to bring that image in first. But for this, I'm going to do something quite simple. I'm just going to scale this down to, let's say, maybe 15 by 15. And then let's just bring this over. I want this to sit in the center. That's not really center, so we could play around with these. Maybe -7 by -7. Still doesn't look right. Let's try maybe -8. No, maybe -7.5. That might work. So that looks pretty much center to me. What I want to do now is go down all the way to render transform. Open this up. And I just want to change the angle to maybe 45 degrees. So something like that. Then if we compile it, and then if we try to play this now, we actually won't see anything since we need to add the widget to the viewport. So for the widgets and everything else, I'm going to keep that inside the character blueprint. So open this up. So this was from part 2. Let's just go ahead and comment this. And if you remember, from false we added this little print string which says collect a battery. We could actually add the prompt for it later on. So let's go ahead and find a bit of space. We might as well do it up here. We're going to right click, and then I want to type event begin play. So it's this one here. So as soon as the game begins, we want to drag this out and then create widget. Then for the class, if we select this, choose the HUD widget. So now the game has created the widget. We just need to add it to the viewport. So let's drag this out and then type add to viewport. So as soon as the game starts, it's going to create the widget and then display it to the viewport, so we can compile that. Then press play. Now we can see we have this little crosshair in the center. So again, you can play around with it, make it look better than a diamond, but you get the idea. Anything we add now to it will be displayed from default. So let's escape, go back. Let's go ahead and open up the blueprint again. And then let's change this to the HUD widget. Let's go ahead and add the battery icon. Let's go over to the palette. Let's type in progress. Let's drag this over. So we have this progress bar, and essentially it works like a health system. So we just go to where it says progress here. We can see right now it's on 0%. If we change this to 1, since this is a float number, it's going to be full. So you can see as it goes up and down, the health or the experience or whatever you want to use this for will go up and down. So that's how it looks by default. We want to change the style, so we want to add our own images. So I'm going to go to style, and we have the background image and the fill image. Now the background image is going to be what the battery looks like when it's empty, and the fill image is going to be what it looks like when it's full. So we just open these up, so we can just add an image. So first we need to go ahead and load these images in. So close this down. Let's go to the assets. Right now we have the battery pickup, so I'm going to first create another folder. I just want to call this battery mesh. Just going to select these, drop these in here. Add a new folder, HUD assets. So now we can drop in here anything that we want to add to the HUD screen. So these are the assets that I'm going to be using. So you only actually need 2 images, one that's full and one that's empty. So for this I created an alternative background. So I will show you the difference and why I've actually created 2. But when you create your own, you only need 2 images, one that's full and one that's empty. So if you want to download these images to use for yourself, I'll make sure to throw a link in the blog, but I'll just go ahead and show you how I did that. So I'm using GIMP, but you can use any kind of photo editing software. So what I did was create 2 images. If I just mute the background, this is the first one, and then this is the second one. So it's pretty simple, just draw a couple of boxes with rounded edges and then fill in the color just to make a simple icon. But then once you have both of these images, just export them out individually. So first I'm just going to drag these 2 in here, but by the end of it I'm going to use this one. So this one I'm not even going to use, but I'll just show you why. If we drag these 2 in, just drop them into the content browser, close this down. First I'm going to select the background, then let's go back to the blueprint. Then I'm going to go to the style. For the background image, just click this arrow here. Now we have this. So you can see my battery is actually standing up. When you create your image, you might want to turn it round so it's lying flat. Otherwise it's just going to stretch out. You might not be able to see, but behind here, if we change this back to 0, you can see it's stretching out the image. So go ahead and resize this. So we can see there's still some scaling issues. So let's go back to the background image. So we can see the image size is 491 by 488. So let's go ahead, go to the top. 491 by 488. There we go. So now it's too big, but at least we have the correct size. Let's go back where it says margin here. We want to change this to 0. Then we can scale this. It looks okay. So add the fill image. So I'm going to go back to the content browser. Select the foreground or the fill image. Then let's go back to the blueprint. Then we can select this icon. There we go. So now when we go from 0 to 1, we have this, which doesn't look right for a couple of reasons. So first I need to make sure the margin is set to 0 because we get that weird scaling. So then the next thing is it's blue, which doesn't look right. And then finally we can see it decreases the wrong way. So first off, let's go to the bar fill type. Let's change this to bottom to top. So now when we fill, empty at 0 and it's full at 1. So you can see this is a float number, and when we created our player battery we actually used an integer, so we're going to have to do a bit of math to make this work. Let's go ahead and fix this color. If we scroll down we can see we have what's called the appearance. If we click this blue color and just drag this down into the white, now your battery icon will be the correct color. So we can see this just adds a different color to whatever your image is. So let's go ahead and change that back to white. So there we go. We need to rescale this now. And you can use the values up here if you want. I'm just going to bring it back down here into position, and we just need to anchor this. So for this anchor, I'm going to drop it here down bottom left. Then if we compile this, see how it looks. So it might still be a bit too big, but again we can always come back and change all this. This is just, we're We just want to make it work first. That's sort of the priority. So let's go back to the blueprint and actually start adding the functionality. So for this, it's pretty simple. Let's go down where it says %. We need to create a binding. So click this button here, create binding. So now we have get %0. We can always rename this if we want, so we know what it does. And this is the battery percentage. So now we want to get the player battery variable and plug it into here so we can tell it what it is. So we can see it's not here in the variables. That's because the variable is inside the third person character. So like we did in the last part where we cast to the blueprint, we're just going to have to do the same thing again. So let's go to the event graph. We're going to use this event on construct here. So let's select these two, delete them. And then from event construct, drag this out, cast to third person character. And again, if yours is called something else, make sure you just cast to wherever you kept your variable. Then from the object wildcard, drag this out, get player character. And then from as third person character, I'm going to drag this out, promote to a variable. And let's rename this player character. So now we have this. Let's go back to the battery percentage. So then I'm going to grab the player character. We're going to get the player character. Then from here, we want to get the variable. So get player battery. And then from here, we need to do that bit of math. So let's first grab this out of the way. From here, let's drag this out and we need to divide. So I'm just going to type divide. And we can see we get a float divided by a float. So we know this number's a float, we know this number's an integer, so when we plug this into the top slot, it's going to convert it for us automatically. Very handy. So then all we need to do is just divide this by 100, and then it'll work. So if we compile this, close this down, let's press play. For some reason we don't have any battery. I think we reduced it just for testing purposes. Let me go back, sorry about that. Let's go back to the blueprints, third person character, battery, play battery. Yeah, there we go. So it's only 5%, so let's change this to 100. Apologize about that. Play this, now we have a full battery. Then when we press F to turn it on, we'll see that the battery slowly drains. So one thing you'll notice straight away, we can see it's like 91, 90, 89, we still don't see any changes. And now we start to see the changes around 85, 84. So I'm just going to exit out of that. So that's not a bug. What that is, if we go back to the HUD widget, to the designer, we can see when, if we go to the percentage here, let me just drag this out so you can see what I'm doing. So right now it's at 1, which is 100. If we said this was 90%, which would be 0.9, we don't see any changes because this top part here is the exact same. Between these two images there is no difference, and that's why I'm going to come back to this image here. We can see it's got a black background rather than a white background. So what I'm going to do is actually use this image. So go back to my content browser. What I can do is I could add the other image here and then reselect it, or what I'm going to do is right click on this and then go to where it says re-import with new file. So then it'll give me the option to change the file, so I'm going to select this one instead. So now we can see the difference. I'm just going to save all this now. We can see now it's 100%. If we turn the flashlight on, we see straight away the battery starts decreasing. So when you're designing your battery asset, make sure you sort of take that into consideration. So maybe you want to change the colors a little bit underneath. But yeah, go ahead and use whatever images you want. So now we have the battery done. Let's go ahead and add the refill counter. So what we want to do is add some text. So go to the palette, type text, and let's just drop some text in here. So for the text, we go to font. We also want to use a font. We can see we only have the default font to use, so we need to add in the font as well. So go back. So like we did with the images, I'm just going to drag in a font. And if you want to know good places to download fonts, there's a link up here. You can go ahead and check out the video I did. So the font I'm going to be using is called Essays 1743, which I think looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and drag this into the content browser. Then if we go back to the blueprint, now under the font, change this to the font that we added in. And then if we scroll up, let's change the anchor point to be the bottom left. Let's go down, change the text. So for this one, I'm just going to type X like this. Let's bring this down. And we can just right click, duplicate this. Now when we duplicate it, let's just select it, because it's been added here at the origin point, so we need to drag this up, bring this over. So this is going to represent the counter or the number of refills we have. So I'm going to change the text to 0. So now we need to create another binding like we did for the progress bar. Select the text here. Under where it says content, let's create a binding for this. Now just like before, we need to get the value of whatever it is and plug it into the return value. So let's go ahead to the player character. Let's bring this in. Then get player character. And then from here, we just need to drag out and let go. We want to get battery refill. And then plug this into here, and that's it. That's all we need to do. Compile that. Play. So straight away we can see we have 1 refill. If we press R to refill, there we go, we've used it. And it goes to 0. And then if we collect these other batteries here, see it fills up. Let's go back to the blueprint. And essentially that's how the HUD widget works. We can add health bars, we can add anything you want, progress bars, or anything else that you need to tell the player. As I said before, I want to also create a prompt widget, which will just make text appear when things happen. So for example, when the battery runs out, we want a piece of text to appear here saying press R to refill. So we can go ahead and do that. We could add it onto the HUD widget, but it gets a bit messy, so that's why I like to create it as a separate widget. So it's up to you how you want to do it. You could add it to this screen or create a whole new blueprint widget. So that's what I'm going to do. Let's save this, close it down. Let's go back to the blueprints and add in a new blueprint. Go to add new, user interface, widget blueprint. I'm going to call this prompt underscore widget underscore blueprint. Open this up, and it's the same process that we did before. We're just going to add some text. Make sure we anchor this to the bottom left. Just change the text to press R to refill. Let's go to the font, change it to the one that we had loaded in. Make sure we rescale this so we can see it. Now one thing we can do to sort of position things, we can bring in the other HUD widget just as a reference. So if I go over here to the palette and just type HUD, we can see we've got the HUD widget here. So I'm just going to bring this in, just drop onto the canvas panel. You can see we have this, so I need to select it and just scale it up. What I could do is just go to the size and just go 1920 by 1080. Try that again. Now we can see what the first HUD widget displays. We can also go down to behavior. I'm just going to change this render opacity to 0.4 just so we can use it as a reference. So we will be deleting this at the end. We're just going to use it as a reference to position our text. So I'm just going to lock this in place. Select the text, but I want to make it look a little bit better. So what I'm probably going to do is select this text again, go to the content. Let's just get rid of all this here. And I'm going to add an image. So let's type in image. Drop this in here. Something like this. Select this one. I'm going to duplicate it. Bring it back over. Just move over here. And then we're going to change this text to refill. So I created an image, so let's go ahead and use it. I'm going to close this down. Go back to assets, go back to HUD widgets, keyboard keys. So you can see I created a whole bunch of keys which we'll be using later on, and stuff for the journal, stuff to turn pages. For now we're just going to bring in the R key. Drop this in. And if you want to download the base key, so it'll just be the key but without the letter, I'll make sure to throw a link in the blog. So if you want to download that, go ahead and do that. So now I've got the R key selected. I'm going to go back to the prompt widget. go to the brush, just add this in. So I think it looks a bit better with the key rather than just all text. And again, that's preference, that's up to you if you want to do that or not. Make sure that they're all anchored to the bottom left. We can see this isn't. Bottom left, there we go. Compile that. So now we want these to appear at a certain point in time. So if we go over to the graph editor, and like we did with the HUD widget, we need to cast to the blueprint. Let's go back to the designer. So let's start with this text here. Scroll all the way down to behavior. For visibility, I want it to be hidden from default and create a binding. So this binding is going to be used for the other two, well, for the text and for the image. So once we've created this once, we can just apply the same binding to the other two things. So let's go ahead and do that. Grab the player character, get player character. From here, we want to add a branch. Then from the player character, we want to get player battery. So for this first check, we want to see if the player battery is, so we want to see if the battery is equal to or less than 0. Because if it is, we want this text to appear. Just tidy this up a bit. Then we're going to add another check. So from true, add another branch. Then from the player character here, we're going to grab this. And we're going to say get battery refill. Then we're going to say if the player has more than one battery, so grab this out, greater than or equal to, and plug this in. So if the player has more than one battery, then we can display this text. If it doesn't, then we're going to have to just make sure this is hidden. So I'm going to press Ctrl W just to duplicate this, change this to hidden, connect the false from this into the hidden, and also this one. There we go. Now compile that. And we could go back to the designer and just apply this to these two images. So select this one, scroll down to behavior, change this to hidden. Now for this binding, we don't need to create a new one. We can just use this get visibility 0. So we probably should have renamed this. Select it, select this one, go to behavior, do the same thing. And then you can compile that. So now before we see this, we actually need to create the widget, just like we did with the HUD widget. So let's go to the third person character. So we can see here from event begin play, we've created the first widget, and then we've also added it to the viewport. I'm going to drag out, create another widget, change this to Prompt Widget, and then like before, we need to add it to the viewport. Go ahead and compile that. So now when we press play, this text should only appear when the battery is at 0 and we've actually got more than one battery to use. So first let's get rid of this HUD widget reference that we added. So I'm just going to delete that, compile it. Then I'm going to go to the third person character. Now to speed things up, we'll be waiting around all day if the battery drain it would take too long. So what I'm going to do is, go to where it says delay here and just speed this up. So I'm going to change this to 0.2 maybe, compile that. So press play, turn on the flashlight. So when the battery hits 0, we should see the prompt just above the battery. There we go, now we can see it's appeared. If we press R to refill, so now we know that works. So it's the same principle for any other prompt text that we want to add. So maybe we want to say when you collect a battery, I'm going to do the same thing up here. Maybe make it fade onto the screen and then move down and then fade out, something like that. And that's where animations come into play. So yeah, I'm going to go through this now and add some more prompt stuff. We will be adding to the HUD widget in the future. We're going to be adding maybe objectives, so whatever the current objective is, maybe a clock and maybe some other things which we'll build later on and then add to this HUD widget. So we're always going to come back to this and keep improving it. But essentially we now have the beginnings of our heads up display. So again, display anything that you want, anything that you think looks good. We've got so many more options and stuff we can add into this widget to make it look a lot better. In part 4, we're going to be creating a line trace so we can start interacting with stuff. So instead of running over these batteries here, we can actually just be able to click and pick it up, or use a key and pick it up, interact with it however you want. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give it a like. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in part 4.